English language was spoken. no great waves, they put the stone behind the capsize. So they really wanted to risk.
Watch your footing, because there will be some stones that's all. Yeah. Effectively, you are standing right in the middle of a Neolithic temple that's built roughly around about 4,000 years ago by Neolithic farmers. Okay. To give you a little rough guide, I know this is a chance pop-up book, but it's one of the better interpretations that we have. Okay. So, this is a rough image of what Stonehenge would have looked like, okay, when it was basically completed. And it's primarily built out of two types of stone. You've got the Saracens, which is basically the outer circle, that go all the way around there, as well as the Trilithon, which is basically the horseshoe, the sort of the larger horseshoe, okay? They were actually carved from a place called Marlborough Downs, which is sort of around about 30 minutes over that direction, over that way, okay? Smaller stones, so these ones here, that represent the circle as well as the horseshoe, they are called bluestone. And they're actually a volcanic type of rock. So imagine if you rub your hand across the face of it, it's actually quite rough. Okay, it's a rough piece of cut. They were actually carved from a place called Priscilli Hill. Does any of you know roughly whereabouts Priscilli Hills are located? No one?
Is it near North Wales?
It is in Wales, not quite North Wales, it's sort of West Wales.
Right.
And I can show you. My hands decided to work this morning. They do. There we go. So basically, they're in a county called Pembrokeshire, or as I like to say, the English parts of Wales.
You can, it is more or less.
Don't ever quote that, please. I will get shot otherwise. Basically, along there, it's on the Cardigan coastline.
Yeah.
Okay. It takes people today a good sort of like 6-7 hour drive to get there. Whereas for the farmers, it would have taken them at least a month to transport the stones over from the hills to here. How they got the stones over, basically, you ever heard of the song Walk Like an Egyptian?
Yeah.
I want you to now think like an Egyptian. Because basically, it's the same technique that they used. So they put the stones onto wooden stakes, lashed it with a lot of rope, put the stakes onto wooden rollers, and then rolled the stones over from the locations to here. Okay? Because each of these stones weighs in tons. So the blue stones weigh between 2 to 5 tons each. The Saracens, they can weigh roughly between 20 to 25 tons each.
25.
That combined trilithon there, that weighs a combined total of 75 tons. Okay, 25 for the bases and 20 for the top. Now, you may have noticed all around the moss and lichen that you see. You will only find this type of moss and lichen right here at Stonehenge. You won't find it any other place in the world. Apart from Antarctica. We don't know why, unfortunately. We don't really know how exactly that it sort of shares that, but it does share the same microorganism. It's very weird, I have to say. But I'll let you in on a little secret. That isn't the official reason why we can't touch the stones today. The official reason why we can't touch the stones is over on this trilithon over here. There we go. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Now, most of the graffiti that you can see roughly dates back to around the Victorian period. Okay, some of it a little bit earlier, some of it a little bit later, depending on when people were basically here. This deep carving, for example, that was done by a Flemish artist called Lucas de Heer, and he came during the 16th century, so 1500s, and basically painted a very famous portrait of Stonehenge during the 1500s, which you can actually see on Google. If you type in Lucas de Heer Stonehenge, you should be able to come up with that photo. But can you see if you can spot two glyphs? A glyph of a dagger and a glyph of an axe head. And I'll give you a slight hint. Look down. can see it. If you can't see it, probably best to use a camera to be able to see it if you've got it. It's quite difficult.
Yes.
Can you see? Anyone see it? If I show it to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you can see it?
Maybe.
Maybe?
But I'm not really sure.
There. Were you thinking of that line there? Yeah. No, unfortunately, that's not correct. So it's basically, there's the dagger, and there's the axe head there. Okay? Yeah?
It's what's inside.
Yes. Yeah. So there's roughly around about 140 axe heads across all the stones, not necessarily on the Stridifon, but across all the stones, and about 14 daggers. Okay. These you can actually see with the naked eye. The rest you have to use like laser technology to be able to see them. Okay. So we're talking Bronze Age. Okay. When I mean Bronze Age, I mean roughly around about 1500 BC. Okay. These were discovered during the 70s by a photographer who basically took photos across all stones, and he came across these glyphs and basically tried to find out basically like why they were actually carved in or what was the history behind them. Unfortunately, he couldn't really tell a lot from them. He tried to theorize that there would be like a number of deaths that occurred in the field that represented these glyphs. Fortunately, that's not true. There were only 56 burials that were discovered in the field. 14 females, surprisingly. And yeah, basically he led a big campaign for people to still come out to see Stonehenge, but to not touch and stand on the stones. That act was actually passed in 1979 under the Monuments Act, which also prohibits domestic animals from coming inside the inner circles as well. Unfortunately, birds don't really care about that rule, so if you see a bird just sort of like plopped on the stones, then just leave them to it, effectively. But yeah, cool. Right, okay, just realised what the time is. So I'm going to let you guys explore now. If you've got any questions, I'm going to be running in the circle. I've got some new starters as well, they'll be up here, so if you've got any questions for them, they can try and ask them. But yeah, effectively this is your time, so yeah, go and explore.
Thank you.
They've got a great patch on the back of their heads.